let's just sew whatever. Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I thought it would be fun to go over some questions that I was asked on Instagram a couple months ago about bag making, because I love bag making, if you didn't already know that. So I will answer them to the best of my ability. Someone asked, how do we acquire more hours every day to sew all the bags all the time? This one still escapes them. Same. And having a 3-year-old is not the way to do it. I'll tell you that right now. I think trying to set aside and schedule time for it is good. Cutting and interfacing one day, trying to sew the next or the next two is not a bad idea. However, if only there were a time we could cancel life, just all meet up in a cabin full of sewing machines and just pretend time doesn't exist, that'd be great. Why are some bag pattern seam allowances a quarter and others are a half? Maybe some are 3/8, and all of that comes down to personal preference of the pattern designer. Lately I've been loving a 3/8 inch seam allowance. It's just, you don't have to really trim it. It's not a huge waste of fabric. However, some pattern designers like to give a bigger room for error with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So that would be the reason there. How do you prevent a baggy lining? This is a really good one. This one is hard to answer because some pattern designers will write it so that there is no baggy lining, so you just need to follow those instructions. But generally, if you know a pattern is not written to prevent that lining from being baggy or saggy, you will want to increase your seam allowance ever so slightly when you sew your lining once you start at the bottom. If you do it at the top, it's going to be too small to actually fit the circumference of your exterior. So that's a bad idea. You don't want to do that. And sometimes shortening it by a little bit will help it not be saggy. So hopefully that helps. How do you know the math for increasing or decreasing a pattern? This is a really good one. This is something a lot of people struggle with, but basically if you're printing a pattern out at, let's say, 75%, then you want to multiply everything in that pattern by 0.75. So 75%. So that can change depending, of course, on what size you're printing your pattern out to, but generally that's the rule. A lot of people ask, well, should I change my seam allowance then? And the answer to that is going to be based off of the size of the bag, I want to say. You can change the seam allowance. It just has to be consistent. So if it's a pattern that calls for a 1/2 inch, you can change it to 3/8 inch. When you're reducing, you just have to be consistent, generally. Someone asked, is there a calculation for adding darts to a bag, like there is with boxing corners? I would imagine it's somewhat similar. I can honestly say I have not tried to add darts to a bag like you would a boxed bottom. So, I don't know. What is a good way to add straps to a wristlet or small crossbody without adding ears? Which I understand completely, because if it's something small and you're putting D-rings in, then it's just like in the seam sticking out. I think some of the connectors that Sonar sells, those like corset rings, could be a really good way. Or adding a little strap that wraps around with D-rings, like I've seen in, I think, Rosa, a lot of different patterns have something similar that aren't just D-rings. Otherwise, I've also seen people add it up near the zipper, but then I guess it has cat ears instead of like human side ears. So yeah, hopefully that can help there. Differences between all the different canvases for lining. That one is a tough one because my waterproof canvas is different from 7 different other supplier waterproof canvases, so I would guess the best answer is to email the company and ask them what their fabrics are like, or maybe do some research on their website to see if they have that information posted. That's a good one. This one isn't necessarily like super bag making related, but it's how do you combat a sewing funk or losing your sojo, losing your sewing mojo, etc. That is a tough one. For me, it's pressure. I am pressured to keep sewing. I am pressured to do this and that. So that keeps me going. But otherwise, I think it's about finding a fabric that brings you joy. I often feel that way. I'm like, I need something like fun and bright and colorful. Like I just want to imagine something and then make it exist. And that's what keeps me going through a sewing funk as well. How do you keep strap adjusters from sliding on webbing? I have seen a lot of people add vinyl to thicken parts of the webbing, like at the end, to prevent the strap from sliding. Otherwise, you'd want to get a slim slider or even a locking slider. Those can be a little bit bulky, but we do have those on my website. We do have slim sliders as well, so that would be a good one. Someone said measuring gussets when trying to make a bag without a pattern. I actually think that there is a calculator on the internet to calculate a gusset. Otherwise, Garth from Myth Leather Co. has a video about that. But essentially, you just want to measure the circumference of the circle. Yeah, not the diameter, the circumference. And add your seam allowance to that. So I just use like a tape measure to wrap around. And then you might want to even shrink it in just a little bit more so that you can add snips so it's a nice tight gusset. Someone said, how did you and your team become such babes? And that one made me happy. What is the trick to binding? Practice and finding a method that you like best is definitely important. So I prefer to use a 1-inch wide binding with tape in the middle and just wrap it around the edges. It's not super, super bulky, but some people prefer the waterproof canvas method where you put it on, wrap it, cut it. Ugh. So I would say it just takes practice. With the method that I prefer, I will sew everything at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then when I add my binding, I'll use a 3/8 inch seam allowance. So I don't know if that will super help, but practice, patience. That would be the best. And then a lot of the questions were, what is your favorite bag to make? And I would say that pretty much all of the bags that I make are some of my favorites. I love the action of taking flat materials and making them 3D into something useful and fun. And that is where the sojo is invigorated. I would love to know if you guys have any more questions down below. I'm happy to answer and do another one of these Q&A videos. But other than that, I will be seeing you later, and I hope you have a wonderful day and afternoon.